Hey everybody, welcome to BrickVault. Today is another LEGO Top 10 Mocks of the Week episode. This is where we find the coolest LEGO creations that we happen to see people building throughout the week. We talk about our favorite 10, and this week there were a ton of really good creations. I've actually got more than 10 listed in the description below. And honestly, check out Brothers Brick and Brick Nerd. They're two excellent sites for curating and checking out really cool builds. So those will also be linked in the description below. And like always, if you want your mocks to be featured in our episode, at the very end we have a Fan MOCs creation section. So once again, in the description below there is an email for submitting pictures of your own LEGO Fan MOCs for showing up in next Sunday's video. Anyways, with that, let's jump right into the very first build of the week. This one's pretty small. It's called LEGO Beholder, and this is a monster from D&D. I don't actually play the game or am very familiar with it, but I don't think that's particularly necessary in order to appreciate the kind of build that we've got going on here. Personally, this sort of one-eyed floating eyeball bleeding creature thing with the tentacle eyeballs, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Doom, but ultimately this is just kind of a weird, crazy, creepy creature that belongs solely to the builder alanboar. And anyways, this was just kind of a fun, weird, creepy mock to start off with. This next one I still can't quite get out of my head because the stance of this Sandtrooper, built by Lego 7, is probably one of the best posed figures I think I've seen all year. To be fair, there's a lot of really good Lego built figures. I mean, brick built type figures, whether they're mechs or just fun stylistic characters coming from other mock builders. But this particular combination of body proportions and how those proportions, or how the figure actually holds itself, makes it feel a little bit more realistic, almost more human than a lot of the other brick built figs. And personally, I like the look of this guy so much more than what we call brick built, or the Lego brick built Star Wars characters that we get that are semi-bionicle pieces. I think this looks better, and I would love to see a line similar to this come out for more Star Wars characters in the future. There's just something so cool about this guy. This next one here is called After Hours by Eylar, and just this single image alone feels like we're looking at something just so perfectly captured. This is actually a build that is based on a single image of the old IBM offices back in the 1960s, and you really can kind of get a feel for that old fluorescent light bulb that's the only light coming from this entire area, just bringing up that lobby as the janitor's cleaning. It's just kind of a fun scene that feels a little bit less about the Lego build itself and more about just capturing a really interesting moment using the medium of Lego. And this next one coming in here, number 7, is a combination of two things that I love, and I feel like I had to put it in. We have here the Delorean, the time machine DeLorean, of course, from Back to the Future. Excellent build. Honestly, there's some really good dimensions here. I especially like the vents sticking out the back. But it's not just a DeLorean, it's actually a Transformer too. So we've kind of got a cross pollination of two different bits of pop culture, and the build for both of these works really well. If you're a fan of Spielberg and Transformers, or Spielberg and Michael Bay for that matter, this is something I think a lot of people would be interested in. And it's awesome that these two ideas just fit so perfectly together. The build really is a lot of fun. Now here we have something a bit more disturbing. This build is simply titled Abandoned School by Jonas Obermeyer, and I do really like these post-apocalyptic scenarios that Lego builders seem to love to put together. And this one I think has definitely a bit more of a darker undertone. The minifig characters themselves at the bottom look pretty freaky. Like, these aren't guys that you would want to run into necessarily if you were out here trying to scavenge for yourself. The environment has been littered with what looks like toxic waste, mushrooms with those little beanie caps, that's a nice touch, and of course lots and lots of skeletons. The architecture for the abandoned school itself is a really, really nice building, minus some of those sort of decrepit details added onto it. I feel like like this could fit into a modular city quite easily. So it's pretty fun that we have both a good example of fun and interesting architecture juxtaposed with a lot of creative and kind of dark details to make a very complete looking snapshot of a decrepit world. And to kind of flip the script, so to speak, this is another snapshot of another slice of life, but I'd put it about as far away from this abandoned school one as possible. This is the Mizu village by two different builders working together. That's Kai NRG and Geneva. When it comes to an organic kind of build with a lot of nature, I like to pay attention to some of the new details, or some of the details that I think adds a bit more dimension compared to other times I've seen similar atmospheres put together. So I gotta say the water has a very, very interesting look to it, with a lot of those trans clear wedge pieces, or trans clear cheese wedge pieces, I don't know, that's what I call them, kind of frosting the tips of the waves. The waterfalls themselves look great as they turn white coming out of the streams, and if you take a close look at all of the greenery, there really isn't any kind of flat surface to the ground pretty much anywhere in the build. The buildings themselves too are also offset from those linear studs, which is once again just another little detail that makes this build feel a little bit more organic and kind of changes up the atmosphere that we're looking at. Now, it has been a good long while since we've shown, or at least I have put up a mock that shows off just sort of a fun old school battle plane. This one being totally fictitious, but very much reminds me of a Miyazaki film. It's called the P98 Nemesis by the builder John Hall. The design here is grounded enough to make you feel like this thing could probably fly in real life with very few augmentations, yet fantastical enough for it to look a little bit wild and kind of crazy. The double cannons that are vertically mounted in the front, I think is a really cool look. I believe that is the Sandtrooper shoulder pauldron from the Star Wars brick-built figs that actually make up the rest of the look for the nose there, which is a really fun detail. And I also really like the detail for the intakes that were used on either side of the plane. Now, I haven't really been counting out the numbers so much for the top 10, but we're now in the top 3 of the top 10. This here is Donwood Castle by Lego Lord. What's fun about this scene is that you can tell all of the buildings were constructed in kind of a similar way. The church and the castle and whatever that tan building is in the middle all kind of feel like they were built by sort of the same stonemasons, maybe just slightly different materials were used. And we usually don't see a village that is so neatly nestled inside a very vibrant forest. It almost feels as if this is a very small village that has been neatly built up in what is otherwise quite wild land. And I also really like that the trees are just starting to change color, so you can have the idea that fall is just sort of around the corner in this particular universe. There's a lot of fun details to notice in big old mocks like this. Personally, I love that use of the aqua in the church. But now when we move on to the top 2, I have to say a little bit of my own personal bias made it into these guys, because Yoda was built by Felix Jensch. Been a long-time fan of this builder. We actually have his red fox in the office, and his very distinct, very detailed sort of brick stacking style has been used in what I'm not sure is going to be a sort of life-size version of Yoda. I don't really know how big this mock is or how big Yoda is in real life, but it looks like it's pretty close. And essentially what we have here is a way better version of Yoda to come from what was that old Ultimate Collector series set that came out a long time ago. Just like the rest of the animal mocks that come from this same designer, there is sort of this air of realism and intent, and kind of like still a creature that's been caught in motion. When it comes to Yoda, he's a relatively still figure, but it does feel like he is indeed leaning forward on his cane, and that the body of this character is actually grounded in a way that feels very lifelike. Personally, I love the wisps of gray that come around his ears, and it is a truly wonderful tribute to the character. So, moving on down to the last build, the number 1 build, my favorite of the week. This comes from Martin Latta, who from what I understand is pretty well known for making some big old mocks, and this is the next big one. It's pretty massive. This is Mos Espa Arena from episode 1, where we have our pod racing. Approximately 100,000 bricks were used for this. It's 280 by 180 centimeters and used in the stands, and of course within the pod racers themselves. There are over 700 minifigs in the whole mock. As far as I can tell, the dimensions for these structures have been followed to a T, and this really does look just like a perfect snapshot of what that scene looked like from the movie. Now, not only does the whole area and scene just look really, really impressive, but the pod racers themselves are awesome. I'm not sure, but it looks like all of them had a bit of custom building to them, even the ones that previously had sets built for them like Anakin's and Sebulba's. So it's just awesome to see a lot of really fun, intricate ship details made out for the pod racers, as well as some fun, massive, grandiose building made for these larger structures. Personally, I just think this scene looks amazing, and that is gonna be it for our LEGO Top 10 MOCs of the episode. Now it's time to check out your fan creations, the pictures you've been submitting all this week. Remember, if you want to submit your own pictures, check out the link in the description below. We also have a little bit more of a description on how to format those pictures, make our life a little bit easier, and also check out the links for all of the flickers and the people that have been shown off in this episode. Okay, that is it for this episode. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. If you enjoy our content, you can always like or subscribe, and here are the fan MOCs of the week.